Game adaptations are a tricky business. In trying to capture the spirit of a comic, show, or movie, something is often lost in translation. Sandland, the open-world adaptation of the titular manga by the late great Akira Toriyama, is a prime example of such a case. In many respects, it's wonderful to see the world of Sandland at this scale with some of its original charm coming through at key moments, and its emphasis on vehicles for exploration and combat gives it a unique gameplay focus.
Nice! One down!
But the majority of its roughly 25-hour runtime equates to a very by-the-numbers action-adventure, where everything else around it, from storytelling to quest design, left me underwhelmed. The story of Sandland isn't necessarily a deep examination of the human condition, nor is it intended to be, but its premise of demons and humans coexisting in an arid wasteland, fighting comically corrupt governments, makes for an immediate hook.
Contact the news office, immediately!
The struggle for resources, particularly water, unravels to become more about building a resistance, making amends for grave mistakes from the past, and the lengths its villains will go to cling onto power and control. Now you control the childish fiend prince Beelzebub, whose soft side always wins out regardless of how often he proclaims to be the scariest, most evil demon around.
Hey you, it's water. Take it.
He's consistently endearing and brings characters together like the shamed veteran Rao and genius mechanic Anne for a fun group that unpacks their dark histories throughout the journey. There's a lot to like about Sandland, but it loses much of its impact from what really seems like a phoned-in presentation. While the voice performances are largely good fits for each character's personality, the writing for the dialogue falls into tons of cliches and rote conversations to carry the story along, and most of these shortcomings are spotlighted in stilted cutscenes that woefully undersell what could have been legitimate moments of hype, levity, or sincerity.
You still want some more, huh?
The rare occasions it's able to turn things up provide some of the excitement I know Sandland is capable of, but they're so few and far between that it's hard to be fully invested in the adventure when the storytelling itself isn't either.
Oh, great. Another trap!
That miss is made just a bit more disappointing because it's such a joy to see Toriyama's signature artwork and character designs in motion, and at times it's impressively recreated in 3D here. His penchant for over-the-top goofiness tucked under some darker themes still underpins this adaptation, even as it ventures into new territory for the sparsely explored series. It's also a great representation of his imaginative vehicle designs, evident in parts of the Dragon Ball series, and that's where this adaptation finds a strength. Sandland's best qualities are found in its vehicle system. You can load up to 5 vehicles to take with you, and then instantly summon each one on the fly, all of which have a variety of use cases and specific strengths. The old reliable tank was my go-to for combat, but in tight spaces, the jump bot's maneuverability gave me a distinct advantage, and its mortar shells were just strong enough to take down enemy bots. Later on, you get a special mech that mixes both melee and ranged abilities, which packs a mean punch, and is required for a few puzzles along the main quest. Quests like these contain some notable highlights with a few interesting boss fights or dungeon-like scenarios that challenge you to aptly wield your roster of vehicles. Infiltrating enemy strongholds, for example, often have distinct stealth sections to break up the pace, followed by some explosive mech battles.
50%!
One sequence led me through a labyrinthine ruin to sprinkle in some puzzles and get me used to controlling the hoverbot before pitting me against a kraken, which made for some satisfying chaos where I used the hoverbot to tread over water before swapping to my tank on safe spots at opportune moments for big damage.
One good shot should do it!
Individually, these elements aren't particularly outstanding, but they are solid enough that they create some enjoyable moments when mixed together. The primary region of Sandland might be a barren wasteland, but there's a nice feeling to driving across large stretches of desert and seeing how far it reaches, or being overwhelmed by large structures like the abandoned battleship at the Junkers Market where scavengers congregate. However, it's the all-new location of Forestland where expansive vistas and lush vegetation provide a refreshing contrast. Winding roads and steep cliffs guide you through a handful of key points of interest and past optional diversions like caves and ruins with plenty of resources to pilfer. On the other hand, side quests and hunting targets, albeit basic, also fill out the world to net you some resources and experience as you might expect, although I do appreciate that Sandland avoids feeling bloated with unnecessary fluff in a way that can typically weigh down the genre.
Well, so it goes.
Vehicles remain most of the focus when it comes to exploring this world too. whether that be just getting from point A to point B or solving basic puzzles in a more linear quest. It works really well since they feel good to control despite their specific quirks, and hot swapping between them seamlessly keeps the momentum going. For example, it was fun to speed through the world on the motorbike, immediately change to my tank to take out an enemy squad, switch to the jump bot to reach a plateau where key resources are found, then be on my way again with the motorbike all without a hitch. Keeping your favorite vehicles in top shape is important too, and that's where the crafting and gathering elements of Sandland come into play. You'll need to upgrade them consistently to stay within enemy levels, and thankfully, most of the resources required to keep the pace come to you naturally through enemy drops and items found in the open world along the way. Customizing each of them with specific weapons or swapping different engines and chips genuinely affects how they function, and it's nice to actually feel the tangible difference once you've upgraded a vehicle or changed its parts. Developer ILCA was cooking with gas when it comes to the customization, riding the line between simplicity and depth. Sometimes you don't really want complexity and just want to blow things up, and Sandland does deliver on that front. But while the vehicle system itself is to be commended, rarely are you presented with challenges that bring out the most in it. That's due in part to a lack of enemy types and poor AI, which often extends to many of the bosses. That means circling around them and blasting away like shooting fish in a barrel is good enough to win most battles. I felt somewhat unsatiated by the time I wrapped up the campaign because despite its vehicles being a definite highlight, I was left wanting more in terms of creative challenge. While I'd say Sandland leans on vehicular combat roughly 70% of the time, the other 30% relies on hand-to-hand on-foot combat. And that's one of its other glaring shortcomings. It's a fairly shallow endeavor that seems like it exists only because it has to in order to fill in scenarios where Beelzebub needs to fight in person. There's a straightforward skill tree to upgrade basic features like better attack damage, stronger special attacks, or more effective item use, and that comes along with some perks and summonable abilities you can get from the supporting characters you meet. However, when it comes to the action brawler style fights, they turn out to be button mashing affairs where you just dodge telegraphed enemy attacks, and they lack both fluidity in the controls and that satisfying feedback you'd expect to get from landing a hit.
So far, so good.
I'm happy to see Sandland get a second win with an open-world action game, and it can sometimes adapt the series in impressive ways. But while there is the potential of an interesting expansion of the manga here, it doesn't manage to replicate what Toriyama's panels were able to illustrate so effectively. Beneath some ho-hum dialogue and stilted cutscenes is a fun story with its heart in the right place.
So cool!
And Beelzebub and friends at least have the charisma to carry you through to the end, alongside a quirky set of supporting characters and villains. Dialing in on vehicular combat and exploration pays off to both maintain the spirit of the original work and deliver some high points, but the quests themselves fall into repetition. Thus, Sandland suffers from the same fate we've seen in many other game adaptations of anime and manga, competent in several respects, with a few moments of brilliance, but for the most part, a simply okay adventure that can occasionally capture what makes the source material special. For more on the recent releases, be sure to check out our reviews of Tales of Kenzera Zhao and Harold Halibut. And for everything else, stick with IGN.
Yeah, same as always.